I'm Dr. Amol Gupta, and I want to thank you for joining me on another episode of Medicine Mentors, where we interview masters in medicine, leading physicians at the top universities across the United States to learn from their experiences and derive key insights, traits, and best practices that can guide medical students and residents. Today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Eileen Moser, who is the Associate Dean for Medical Education and a Professor of Medicine at Penn State College of Medicine. As the Associate Dean, she oversees the curriculum for more than 600 medical students at the college. Dr. Moser completed her education and training in internal medicine and geriatrics at Rutgers University in New Jersey. She's held multiple positions through undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate medical education. She's passionate about mentorship in education as reflected through her research, which touches on important topics of high-value care and leading behavioral change through medical education. She's a member of many state and national committees, including the American College of Physicians, where she serves on the Board of Regents, and on the Board of Trustees on the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Thank you so much, Dr. Moser. It's an honor to host you today on our podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. It's so great to be here.
So, Dr. Moser, when one looks at your CV and your resume, we see this history of success. But what does success really mean to you? How would you define it?
For me, interestingly, success is not about title, right? It really isn't. Success for me is, did I make an impact? Did I do something good? And is it addressing what I feel is the reason for my existence? So you can look at a CV and you can check off boxes, but I would argue that that's not really, for me, what success is.
That's really well put. Have you always been a high achiever, or was there a moment when things changed for you or something happened that changed the trajectory of your journey?
When I was in my final year of residency, my third year of residency, I was slated to be chief resident, and I had my critical care fellowship all set up. I got cancer, and while I was 7 months pregnant. And so that will turn you on its head, won't it? And so it did that for me. And I think, it was a hardship, but in a way it was a gift, if you can characterize something like that as a gift, in that it really made me go introspective and reflect and think about what's my meaning? Why am I here? What's the purpose of my life? What do I want out of my life? And I think that was a really important moment in my life when I started to think about things differently.
Very few physicians that I've spoken with have actually dealt with a medical situation personally. How has that changed the way you deliver patient care today?
Yeah, I'd like to think that I had a lot of empathy before going through an illness. Unquestionably, there's a paradigm called the wounded healer. Unquestionably, when you've sort of walked that walk, you do come out with a different perspective. I don't think you have to walk that walk to come out with that perspective, but maybe it sort of puts a little fire under your feet. I mean, it certainly provides meaning to go through something, and it provides an ability to understand patients as well. So I would like to think that I'm an empathetic listener. I'd like to think that I try to understand the patient's point of view. I like to think that that comes out with shared decision making, which is really what we need to do to help our patients not only understand their story, because every patient has a story, right? And that's really important because they want to tell their story, but it also, quite honestly, it just improves adherence.
You went through a period of time when you asked some very difficult questions. How do we, someone who may not go through that kind of an experience, really become focused and committed to answering questions like, why am I here? What is my purpose in life?
So it's about reflection. It's about every day, after the end of the day, thinking about what went well, what didn't go well, what I can do better, what was the meaning of today, what is something I'm thankful for, what is something that I want to improve in myself. Very, very important. The other thing that I think is really important is to think about your own why. What's your personal why? And what is a why? So a why is why I exist, why I get out of bed in the morning, what's my purpose, my cause, my belief that drives me. How do you get to your why? One way you can get to your why is through reflection. Another way, I do this with medical students actually, I have them think about 5 stories in their life that are important to them. And then they tell those stories to another individual. And then the second individual picks out themes. And, I told you my story, one of my stories, right? But it's those stories when they come together, you can find themes that might lead to your why. And again, my why is going to be different than your why. Our whys are very personal. They're discovered. They're not created. So they're discovered. It's what is inside of you that drives you. So for an example, my why is to serve God and heal and cultivate others as healers in order to improve lives in our community and beyond. So that's my why, which just comes out of just experiences.
I can definitely appreciate the power of understanding the why. Another one of the things you talk a lot about is also the how, that it's not just enough to reflect, but we need to take action. Can you share some strategies with us on how to define our course of action?
Yeah. So the how is you're talking about your vision. And when you think about your vision, that's kind of your what. And your strategy is how you're going to get to your what. And think about where you want to be. But what you want to do is not just think about it in terms of your work. You want to think about it in different domains of your life. Because to be a rich, full, well-rounded individual, that's important, right? I mean, you have to be true to yourself, not only in your work, but also think about it in terms of community, family, spirituality, well-being, but whatever your domains are for you. Think about all of those and then think about where you want to be in 5 years. Write out your vision statement, and you can go online and look at different individuals' vision statements. Write that out, then reflect on whether it is consistent with your why, with your mission statement, and then put it in a place, take it out every 6 months and just see. And those two things, your why, mission statement, and your what, which is your vision statement, will guide you.
So we've talked about the why, we've talked about the what, the vision. Now let's talk about the how.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of us are great thinkers, but where we lack is really defining the plan. How am I going to get there? Can you share some strategies with us on how we actually achieve what we've set up for ourselves in terms of our vision and our mission?
Right. So you're talking strategies, and you have to have a strategy. Otherwise, how will you ever get to your goal? And so one way to do that is to write SMART goals, right? So you may know SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. That sort of holds your feet to the fire. And write long-term goals and short-term goals. So you have to take that long-term goal and break it into shorter action items, right? So let's say you want to be the next president of the American Medical Association, right? So we're going to have Dr. Gupta for president. You're going to think about long-term goals, but you're going to think short-term, right? And so one of your short-term goals could be, I'm going to join the AMA. I'm going to start networking in the AMA. I'm going to also do the best I can in residency so that I become, an excellent physician in whatever field you choose. But you get the idea.
That's wonderful. I'm taking a lot of really great notes here. It seems that there are a lot of articles coming out today. Physician burnout is on the rise. What have you seen as the cause of physician burnout? And how do you see it related to this personal why?
The way I think about it for myself is I think about it in terms of, system factors, which is what you're referring to. So the healthcare system, the hospital in which you work in. I think about it in terms of community factors, your tribe, if you will, your family, the community in which you work. It may be your residency. It may be your practice. It may be the students that are in your group. And then I also think about it in terms of personal factors. And so personal factors would be, your own personal time management, your well-being, how you manage your well-being, how you find that balance. And what ties to what we're talking about, the why, is your personal factors also is your mission, your vision, and your strategies. Are they congruent? And are they congruent with your values? And part of this too is how much perceived or actual control you have over these things. So you might have control over some, no control over the others. And then the other piece is resilience. And how do you build resilience? Because there's so much that really is not in our control. And how do we navigate that?
A lot of care is you've devoted a lot of time in your research has been moving towards value-based care. Can you talk to us a little bit about SOAP to SOAP V?
Yeah, so I'll just explain that SOAP V is the traditional SOAP note that you write as medical students, as residents, as attendings, subjective, objective assessment plan with a twist. So within the V, there are three components. The first is evidence of value. So it's all about evidence. This is what we do as physicians. What is the benefit and the harm of that test or treatment? So have you considered the evidence of the treatment versus the alternative? Have you considered the evidence for the test and whether it's going to help you or not? So that's the first part, evidence. The second is patient values. So does the patient even want that particular treatment? Is the patient interested in getting that test? And this is an important part of that shared decision making, and understand the patient's point of view and understanding the patient's meaning of their illness. And then the third part of the V is the relative cost. So what's the approximate cost of the test or treatment? Are there downstream costs? Are there less costly alternatives with similar benefits? So it's really very simple. It's just adding that V and using it as a cognitive forcing function.
That's wonderful. SOAP V, I like it. I really do. This podcast is about mentorship and really identifying the impact of mentorship in the lives of students and residents. You've been a student, you've been a resident, you've walked through the educational process and been on the other side now as a mentor for many years. Can you share your perspective on mentorship? What does mentorship mean to you?
I would say mentorship is finding those individuals that can help you understand, lead, give you advice in different ways, even if it's only small areas. I think one of the pieces of advice I might offer is when you look for mentors, it isn't about finding just one person. It may be people along the way that help you with small things. And going up to a person and saying something like, I'm very interested in value. Can we talk about that? And building that relationship.
In your journey, have there been mentors that have played a critical role? And how did you establish a strong relationship with them?
I would say I've had a number of mentors. One mentor who had an indelible impact on me was Dr. Alex Stagnaro-Green, who's at University of Chicago. He's a dean at one of their regional campuses. And what Dr. Stagnaro-Green did for me was he was just very, very generous in his advice and his mentorship. So when I started off my career as a clinician educator, trying to determine where my role would be, he's the one that I would say is the primary person that got me excited about medical education. And he is a generous, wonderful person, but that's not to say that he wasn't tough at times. So if I wrote something or wrote a paper, he would send it back to me. It had more red than black and white. So I grew from that. He would give me advice when he heard me speak, tell me things that I said that I didn't even realize. So he did a lot of coaching in addition to mentorship. So I was very, very fortunate. And then I would say I've had a number of what I would say big brothers and big sisters along the way. Dr. Galen Stanislaus, Dr. Ben Stein, Dr. Norman Ertel, one of my first group of people at the VA when I would say I felt really quite vulnerable. It was my first job. It was right after having cancer. And boy, they took me under their wing and really shepherded me and sheltered me. And for that, I remain eternally grateful. If you are so lucky to ever have a person like any of those individuals, and I wish that for every single one of you, I would say just honor them.
What would your advice be to those who haven't been able to develop that network of mentors of the big brothers and the big sisters? How can they start on this path?
Be persistent, but persistent in a nice way, right? So it's about relationships. Most people, if you ask for specific advice and for specific feedback, they will give that to you. So I would say just relationship building and persistence in a very nice way. And, if it's a good relationship with the mentor, you're both getting something out of that because the mentor also is getting an intense amount of joy out of seeing your successes.
Absolutely. So, of all the elements that you've shared with us today, what's one thing that you wish you knew when you started medical school or residency that you would want all of the listeners to really take to heart and practice?
It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You're going to do great things. Just keep thinking about where you are, where you're going, what's your why, what you're doing. Is it congruent with your values? Think about where you want to go, how you're going to get there, and reflect, reflect, reflect.
Wow, this was amazing, Dr. Moser. I'm going to recap. I'd say really 3 things that I'm taking of all the wonderful things and pearls of wisdom that you shared with us that resonated the most with me. The first thing you said about success not being about titles, not being about achievements, it's about doing something good. And that's really all it is. And as long as we're increasing goodness in the world and reducing bad, that's success. I'd say the second thing is really distilling the why, the what, and the how into the mission statement, the vision statement, and SMART goals, where either one of them is not enough, but the 3 of them together can create tremendous impact. And I'd say the third thing I learned is the statement that it's going to be okay, because I think we just don't say it enough. So thank you so much, Dr. Moser.
It's really been a pleasure.
To our audience, thank you for tuning in with us here on the Medicine Mentors. Thank you for joining us as we learn from the masters of medicine.